All right. Welcome back to the podcast. Tonight we have a special guest joining us, Mr. Henricus Jansen. If you could briefly introduce yourself and tell us who you are.
My name is Henricus Jansen. Today I am a forensic engineer. I reconstruct vehicular accidents that have gone into litigation. I do that from an engineering perspective, but I also present my cases in court.
Okay. Could you give us a brief rundown of your leadership experience and qualifications to be discussing the topic of leadership?
So before this career that I have as a accident reconstructionist or a forensic engineer, I managed and directed a professional cycling team here in the United States for about 3 years. We had on the athletic side, we had about 15 people in the team, and then we also had we had mechanics, we had masseurs, we had people for PR. So those all together were another 15 or 20 or so people. So the whole organization was about 30 to 35 people. My job, I was in charge of hiring and firing, managing and directing, putting logistics together for all our travels. And prior to that, I was a team owner myself for 2 years, where I dealt with sponsors and directed a much smaller group of 4 people. And with respect to other leadership experiences as an athlete myself, I have often been in the role of team captain, meaning that I, not in every event per se, would be the lead rider, not necessarily the one that had to win the race, but I had to be the one that would direct the team and try to win the race that day. So that also entailed to have communication with management that would control the team.
And so, throughout your experience, what have you learned about the successful or the most successful dynamics or philosophies of leadership? And what methods of communication and direction prove to be most successful for the team or organization?
I mean, it sounds like a detailed question, but it's still pretty broad. But let me see how I can best answer that. I'm of the opinion that being a leader is something that you earn, so to speak. It's not something that you could appoint yourself to, or or being appointed to a leadership role, let's say by management. It is something that I feel needs to be earned by your team, the team that you're leading. So with that comes respect, clear communication, honesty, basically having a open mind to whatever situation you're confronted with. Because as a leader, you're going to be dealing with a lot of facets of how a company or how a team is run. So it can be an ungrateful job in the sense that you're only going to be praised when things are going well. Actually, you're not going to be praised when things are going well. You're only going to be criticized when things are going wrong. When things are going well, everybody will take that somewhat for granted. So I think that's another facet of a leadership position that one should be aware of. The second part of your question as to how to best put that into effect, I think I gave away some of that already by having clear and open communication. What I found to be most effective, or one of the most effective dynamics, is that you let's say you're confronted with a problem, is to not jump to conclusions and to basically tell yourself that when you're presented with something, you've only scratched the surface. So it's your duty to not jump to conclusions, but diligently try to figure out what exactly happened, and take appropriate actions to resolve the issue.
So, throughout throughout your career as both a team manager and later as a forensic engineer, how have you balanced your work versus your personal life, and what keeps you driven to keep advancing throughout your career?
Well, I have always preached that you should do what you love, what is a passion. If you can turn that into your job and earn a living that way, the boundaries between work and personal life become somewhat vague. But on the same token, it's if you've been able to turn your passion into a living, it's a way to put yourself out there and be most efficient about the job you're trying to get done. So what I'm trying to say here is that you may find yourself struggling sometimes if you're very passionate about your job. So it's a balance that's different for everybody. So for some people, it could be all about work, and for some people it cannot. So it's very subjective. It comes down to the individual.
And once more, speaking to your roles throughout both managing a team and working in a more corporate career, what strategies coming from the leader are most successful in keeping employees or team members satisfied, motivated, and driven to do their own work?
Well, just like how Napoleon took to the battlefields himself sometimes, I think that's what you ought to be doing as a leader as well. You need to put yourself out there, roll up your sleeves, and show that you can be part of every facet of the process. So that also comes with an attitude where, yes, you may be assigned a leadership role, which in a way puts you, higher up the ladder of hierarchy within a company, but it's only a title. Day-to-day operations, I believe, everybody should be treated equally. So it's important that you have a system set out where everybody can be heard. And that may be a layered system. You may have a subdivision within your company that forms as a liaison between the larger group of workers, and will be able to address the issues that they encounter to you in a condensed format. But ultimately, again, I'm a strong believer that you should be home. You should know every part of the process of a particular company. You should be willing to participate in that or to partake in that, so that it shows equality in the sense of from a human perspective, so to speak, not necessarily an operational perspective. Because, like I said, if you're in a leadership position, you will have more responsibilities. Typically, it goes associated with greater pay. but that's only to justify the skill set that you have. But on a people level, I think it's important that everybody feels treated equally.
That's a trend that I've also been hearing amongst the other people that we've had on the podcast, where respect and understanding is one of the biggest parts in successful leadership. Um, in my research paper that I wrote about leadership, another interesting thing that I found out um, when it comes more so to the longevity and the motivation or the longevity of your organization and the individual motivation of your employees or teammates, or in the case of Julius Caesar, his soldiers, the principle of, well, what Julius Caesar did every time that him and his men would conquer new land, um, he would equally divide all of the loot of war, meaning the food, the property, the the gold, the money. He would divide it amongst his army. So success for Julius Caesar meant success for each individual soldier. Um, does that principle carry over into the modern corporate world?
Well, it depends where you work, right? Some companies don't, some companies will do it. I'd be a strong propounder of that. I think that if you're born with leadership skills, you ought to be feeling very fortunate that you can actually create opportunities for other people, like Caesar did for his soldiers, so to speak. So yes, I'm a very strong propounder of that. I think that just like any facet in life, you should take great joy in the process of things. So as a leader of a company or of a team or whatnot, you should enjoy that process. Whatever the rewards are going to be in the end are icing on the cake. But if you're in a position where you can help other people grow, you're very fortunate. And so yes, I would most definitely put that dynamic on the foreground when you run a business.
And speaking of, you said if you were fortunate enough to be born with certain characteristics that would make you a prominent leader. What do you believe those characteristics are, and were you fortunate enough to be born with them? And a second part to that question, are there also certain leadership characteristics that you believe are more easy learned or not limited to simply the innate personality traits that you were born with?
So I may have to further divide this up. So, I mean, let me be clear. I mean, we've had bad leaders in this world, right? I mean, go back to World War II. I don't even have to mention names. So I want to make a clear difference between somebody who solely enjoys being in a position of a leader versus somebody who enjoys, making a company or a team get to their best potential. So it becomes somewhat subjective, right? I mean, there's leaders in this world that feel they have achieved their objective and feel that it was the best thing to do, but from a moral perspective, we know it was not. So I think with respect to that, we probably have to get a little bit more specific as to what type of goals an organization is trying to achieve, and then to see if that's if those are morally just or if they fit in today's society as morally just. Now, with respect to being born with certain characteristics of a leader, again, I mean, I'm sure you can, with good intellect and education, you can horsepower your way into a leadership position. I think that if you have the right characteristics in and you enjoy basically creating this, this oiled machine, this well-performing organization, you should do it. But it really, again, it really depends on the objectives that you have.
Going back to what you said earlier about how a leader takes up the majority, if not all, of the responsibility for the organization and everyone beneath them, and how they take fault when things go wrong, and people simply expect things to go right. I think if you are born, or if you simply desire the ability to control that, and you can deal with the responsibility, and you enjoy the responsibility that comes along with it, I think the rest of it can be learned. Obviously, as a good leader, you need to be able to connect well with people. Some people might be born with that easier, being able to do that easier than others. As a good leader, you need to have a good voice, and you need to be able to project and speak with good rhetoric. Likewise, that can be practiced and learned. If I had to give it a percentage, I would say maybe 1/3 natural and within you, and 2/3 of it is dependent on your environment and the work that you put into it.
Do you want my opinion on that?
Or I have another question.
Well, for example, within the organization I currently work, I have been criticizing the form of leadership that they have been exhibiting over, what is it? It's been 17 years since I've worked with that company. I've openly criticized it. They have slowly implemented changes. However, they have never asked me to be part of this process. So at one point, I felt that even though I don't have an innate desire to be a manager or a leader, I now feel the responsibility to, start my own company where I can exercise some of those principles that I'm strongly behind. So that'd be an example of me who I don't feel I am. I don't have the extreme desire to be a leader or a manager. However, I know I have the capacity to be one. And so there may be a time and place, yes, where you have to step up to the plate and put those qualities to use. So it is a complicated question, though, right? I mean, it's if you, I don't think you're necessarily born a leader. I agree with you. I mean, some people get a tremendous amount of satisfaction just being in charge for the sake of being in charge, without any desire or any true desire to make a organization run as efficiently as it can be, and to help other people blossom and grow. That's not a good way or a good starting point for a leader, for example. But they may innately feel a much greater desire to be a leader than I do.
Building off of that, more of a fun theoretical question. Who do you think would make a more effective leader on a large scale? Someone who is very empathetic and can understand the feelings of people well, or someone who is a sociopath and cannot empathize with people but knows what needs to be done in the long run and what will ultimately contribute to success? I feel like, or I have been told that many of the Fortune 500 CEOs and many people in extreme positions of power are often have sociopathic tendencies. What is your opinion on that?
Well, I agree, right? I mean, I already gave the example of World War II and how, this one leader came to rise and, did all these horrible things. But what you just said, I mean, also somewhat rings home with today's politics, to see, how people can get into charge, not necessarily based on having great skills, but, having more like the sociopathic tendencies that drives them into leader position and actually creates great following. So it's it depends on your environment. I mean, if you have an audience that is very desperate and in need of somebody with, quote unquote, a strong voice, this person can get a large following, become a leader. And I mean, whether he does something good with it or not is a that's another ingredient. So it's a layered question. I mean, there's a lot of steps to it before you can really categorize under what circumstances you can profile yourself, or when someone can profile themselves as a great leader, and whether that's a good leader.
Yeah. To wrap it up, I'm going to ask you the question that I ask at the end of all of my podcast episodes. And surprisingly, I've gotten a different answer from each person that I've asked. If you could do it all over again, if you could relive your career from the very beginning, would you do anything differently?
So every single question you ask can go in, an answer can come from, can go in so many directions. I mean, if I were to set a few parameters, right? One being that, because in hindsight's 2020. If I'm going to look back, I know what I could have done different to maybe achieve better results. But if I stick with knowing what I knew at that moment in time, and have I made the best decisions, then I'm going to say yes, because it could not have been any, or otherwise I would have made different decisions. Yeah. So I don't think I've made any wrong decisions. In hindsight, could I have done things differently and achieve quote unquote better results? Because that's another category that needs to be quantified or quantified or categorized or defined. Sorry, what's success? Right?
I am asking in hindsight, more so in an attempt to gather advice, and maybe if myself or any of the listeners find themselves in a similar position, so that they can better help make those decisions. So looking in hindsight, are there any significant things that you would have done differently throughout your career?
Would have or could have? Because let's say, okay, I think you should have a very good understanding of the person that you are. I think that should be that's the main goal in life is to discover yourself. And in that process, if in that process or during that process, in my opinion, you will then automatically make the right decisions. If you fail to do so, you may look back and say like, hey, you know what, I should have taken a different course of action on certain topics. So, for example, if I wanted to have more money in the bank and have a bigger house and more things, then I should not have been a professional athlete, because that didn't grow me a big bank account. I should have recognized, but I didn't. I should have recognized at a much earlier age that I should have put that aside and focused on finishing my studies and get into business and try to make that become economically successful. However, because I became a professional athlete, I learned about so many facets of life that I would not have been exposed to had I taken that other route, the route of focusing on economic wealth. So I've gained in my opinion, I have gained a tremendous amount of wealth, but in different areas. So today I do feel like a very fortunate and very quote unquote rich person in many different ways. So no, I would not have done anything differently. And to try and be a little bit more specific for your audience, I think it's important that they keep taking a good look at themselves and figure out who they are, what they're capable of, and how they can put that most efficiently to use in a most pleasant way. Right? I mean, that's ultimately the path you want to travel.
Yeah, that's a beautiful piece of advice to end off episode number 4 of the podcast. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and have a great day.